One night in Arizona, strange lights crossed the sky, and thousands of people looked up. March 13, 1997, across Arizona, the evening began like any other. Families were returning home. Cars moved through the desert highways. The lights of Phoenix were beginning to illuminate the night. Then people started looking upward. Bright lights had appeared in the sky. Some witnesses described a group of lights moving together in a strange formation. Others believed they were watching something enormous passing silently overhead. Reports began coming from different locations across Arizona. And as more people saw the lights, one question began spreading: what was moving across the Arizona sky that night? There were explanations: military aircraft, flares, aircraft formations, and something far more mysterious in the eyes of those who witnessed it. The event would eventually become known as the Phoenix Lights, more than 2 decades later. The debate continues, but before we examine the explanations, we need to return to the night when it all began. Welcome to Golden Smile Stories, where the mysteries of the past still refuse to disappear. Tonight, we're taking you back to a night when thousands of people looked into the sky and witnessed something they could not explain. What were those mysterious lights? A secret military operation? A natural phenomenon? Or something far stranger? Stay with us as we uncover the story, the witnesses, and the theories behind one of the most unforgettable mysteries ever seen in the night sky. If you enjoy true mysteries, unexplained events, and forgotten stories, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Golden Smile Stories. Now, turn down the lights, look toward the sky, and let the mystery begin. On the evening of March 13, 1997, Arizona was settling into darkness. The desert stretches around Phoenix were quiet, while the city itself began to glow beneath the night sky. But north of Phoenix, something unusual was already being reported. At around 8:16 p.m., a witness near Paulden reported seeing a group of lights moving across the sky. According to the report, the lights appeared red-orange and seemed to travel in a formation. The witness was not describing a single flashing aircraft. Instead, the lights appeared to move together, and that difference immediately made the sighting unusual. As the lights continued across the Arizona sky, more observations began to emerge. People in and around Prescott reported seeing strange lights. Some witnesses described several lights positioned in a line or formation. Others believed the lights were connected to a much larger object that was difficult to see against the darkness. There was no internet for ordinary people to instantly compare what they were seeing. There were no smartphones, no social media, no live streams. If someone looked into the sky and saw something unusual, they had to rely on what they could see with their own eyes. That made eyewitness testimony especially important. And on this night, the reports continued. As the mysterious lights moved southward, they eventually entered the region around Phoenix. The number of people who noticed them increased. Some witnesses later described an enormous V-shaped formation moving silently above them. Others remembered individual points of light rather than a solid object. The descriptions were not perfectly identical, and that would become one of the most important details in the entire mystery, because the Phoenix Lights were not necessarily one single event. There may have been several different sightings occurring at different times that night. But to the people watching the sky, one thing was certain. Something unusual was happening, and thousands of eyes were beginning to turn toward the darkness above Arizona. As the night progressed, the reports became even more remarkable. The lights were now being observed closer to Phoenix. For people on the ground, the experience was deeply unsettling, not necessarily because the lights appeared frightening, but because they seemed difficult to explain. Several witnesses later described a formation that appeared to move slowly across the sky. Some believed the lights were arranged in a huge V or boomerang shape. Others described a line of individual lights. And some witnesses became convinced that the lights were part of one enormous object. One of the most memorable aspects of the reports was the apparent silence. People expected something that large to produce sound. But many witnesses remembered seeing little or no noise accompanying the lights. That made the experience even more unusual. Imagine standing outside your home at night. Above you is a dark Arizona sky. Then a series of brilliant lights begins moving overhead. There are no obvious engine sounds, no clear aircraft shape, just lights moving slowly against the stars. You watch, your neighbors watch. And suddenly you realize that you are not the only person seeing them. That was the experience reported by many people that night. As the lights moved across the region, telephone calls and reports began appearing. The National UFO Reporting Center eventually collected numerous accounts associated with the Phoenix event. But there was an important complication. Not every report described exactly the same thing. Some sightings occurred earlier in the evening, others were reported later. Some described formations, others described individual lights. This raised a fascinating possibility. Perhaps people were witnessing more than one event. That possibility would become central to later explanations. The Phoenix lights were becoming famous, but at the time, nobody watching from the ground knew that their observations would become part of a mystery discussed for decades. For those witnesses, it was simply an extraordinary moment. They were looking at something in the sky, and they wanted to know what it was. As public interest in the Phoenix lights grew, another possibility entered the discussion. Perhaps the lights were not something unknown at all. Perhaps they were military aircraft. Arizona has a long history of military aviation. The state contains major military facilities, training areas, and large stretches of open desert where aircraft can operate. So the possibility of military activity was not unreasonable. One explanation focused on military exercises taking place around the same period. Aircraft can appear very different from the ground, especially at night. Distance can be difficult to judge, speed can be deceptive, and lights positioned on several aircraft can sometimes appear to form a single pattern. But there was another explanation that would become especially important: flares. Military aircraft can release illumination flares during training exercises. From the ground, these bright objects can appear suspended in the sky as they slowly descend. Under the right atmospheric conditions, several flares could potentially create an unusual visual effect. Years later, military officials acknowledged that illumination flares had been used during exercises in the region around the time of the Phoenix lights. This became an important piece of the puzzle, but it did not explain every reported sighting. Why? Because some witnesses said they had seen lights moving across the sky long before the reported flare activity. Others insisted they had seen a large formation traveling over the landscape. This created two competing interpretations. One possibility was that the Phoenix lights were largely the result of ordinary aircraft and military activity, interpreted differently by observers. The other was that some sightings remained unexplained even after known military activity was taken into account. There was also another problem: human perception is not perfect. At night, without familiar objects nearby for comparison, it can be extremely difficult to determine how large or how far away a light really is. A distant light can appear close, a slow-moving object can seem enormous, and several separate lights can appear connected. So perhaps the mystery was not simply about what was in the sky. Perhaps it was also about how the human eye interpreted something unfamiliar. But that still left one question: could every major Phoenix lights report really be explained by known aircraft and flares? The debate was far from over. The mystery of the Phoenix lights became more complicated because eyewitness accounts did not all agree. Some people were convinced they had seen a massive object, others remembered only a series of bright lights. Some described the formation as triangular, others described it as a V, and some reported lights that appeared to move independently. This variation is important. When hundreds or thousands of people witness an unusual event, their descriptions naturally differ. Each person sees the event from a different location, their viewing angle is different, their knowledge of aircraft is different, and their expectations can influence what they believe they are seeing. That does not mean the witnesses were lying. It simply means eyewitness testimony has limitations. A person can honestly report exactly what they believe they saw and still be mistaken about the object's distance, size, or identity. The Phoenix lights also became a cultural phenomenon. Television programs began discussing the event. Newspapers revisited the reports. Witnesses told their stories. And the phrase Phoenix lights became permanently associated with unexplained objects in the night sky. But the longer the story continued, the more difficult it became to separate the original observations from later interpretations. Some stories grew more dramatic over time. Some details became part of popular retellings even though they were difficult to verify. And that is where a mystery can become something larger than the original event. The Phoenix lights were no longer simply a series of lights reported over Arizona. They had become a symbol of the unknown, a symbol of the possibility that something might exist beyond our understanding. But there is an important distinction between unexplained and extraterrestrial. Something can remain unidentified without proving that it came from another planet. That distinction matters. Because after decades of investigation, there is still no universally accepted evidence proving that extraterrestrial spacecraft were responsible. At the same time, not every witness feels satisfied by the conventional explanations, and somewhere between those two positions lies the enduring mystery. Maybe the answer is completely ordinary. Maybe several ordinary events were combined into one extraordinary story, or maybe some observations remain unexplained simply because we no longer have enough evidence to reconstruct exactly what happened. More than 20 years have passed since the night of March 13, 1997. The people who witnessed the lights have grown older. The technology used to observe the sky has changed completely. Today, almost everyone carries a high-quality camera in their pocket. A strange light can be photographed within seconds. Videos can be uploaded instantly. Thousands of people can compare what they saw in real time. But in 1997, things were different. The Phoenix lights existed largely through human memory, reports, photographs and video recordings. And that is one reason the mystery continues. There is evidence, there are witnesses, there are explanations, but there is no single explanation that has convinced everyone. Military flares provide a plausible explanation for some of the later lights. Aircraft and atmospheric conditions may explain other observations. Human perception may account for some of the dramatic differences between eyewitness descriptions. Yet for many witnesses, these explanations do not completely match what they remember, and that is where the Phoenix lights remain. Not necessarily as proof of extraterrestrial visitors, not necessarily as evidence of a secret aircraft, but as an extraordinary example of how a few hours in the night sky can create a mystery lasting for generations. Perhaps someday, a forgotten military document will reveal another piece of the puzzle. Perhaps a witness will produce new evidence, or perhaps the final explanation will remain frustratingly ordinary, a collection of aircraft, military exercises, flares, distance, darkness, and thousands of human eyes trying to understand something unfamiliar. We may never know exactly what every person saw that night, but we do know one thing. For several hours over Arizona, people looked into the darkness and saw something they could not immediately explain, and decades later, we are still looking upward with them. Maybe the Phoenix lights were aircraft. Maybe they were military flares. Maybe they were several different events that became one unforgettable mystery. But on that night in 1997, thousands of people looked into the Arizona sky and asked the same simple question: what am I looking at? Perhaps the mystery was never about proving what was up there. Perhaps it was about remembering how it felt to look into the unknown. The truth may be hidden, but the mystery never dies until we meet again. Keep searching for the truth. This is Golden Smile Stories.